Good afternoon. We will now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on April 6, 2021 to order at 2 p.m. Join me online today are Councilmember Andrea Bearfield, Councilmember Josh Borderoux, Councilmember Kelly Palmer, and Councilmember Jim Holmes. City staff also online today are Bradley Ford, City Manager, Jennifer Ritchie, City Attorney, and Esmeralda Hudson, City Secretary. If you will please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. On March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to its state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state of disaster declaration expires. In accordance with physical distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, this meeting will not be open to the public attending in person. This meeting is being broadcast live at wccc.tv. The audio is also being recorded. The video and audio recordings will be available to the public. According to the governor and attorney general, statutes that may require face-to-face interaction between members of the public and public officials are suspended, provided, however, that the governmental body offers alternative methods of communication with the public officials. This includes public comment on agenda items. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to speak or submit their written comments on the listed agenda item were asked to register with the City Secretary's office by noon today. Individuals who register to speak on an agenda item must limit their comments to 3 minutes. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation, regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. We will now recess the regular session and convene to work session with the report from our city manager, Bradley Ford.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. We do have one change to the agenda today. Staff's going to be withdrawing resolution 2021-209, which was an award of a bid to HCS, a commercial general contractor for the State Highway 6 and Loop 340 utility relocation project. Staff anticipates this item will be back in front of the council on April 20th at our next meeting. I don't have any employee recognition or organizational updates today, so I'll move quickly into a review of our informal reports. We have 2 on the agenda today. The first being our standard update on COVID-19. We continue to see positive trends related to hospitalizations and case incidents, as well as positivity rates in our community, with our numbers being well below prior highs seen in the summer and winter of 2020. I just received our hospitalization report just a few moments ago and saw that our number of hospitalizations is down under 20, which if you'll recall at our peak was in the 160s at times earlier, just a couple of months ago. So encouraging numbers there. Additional encouraging numbers in our informal report regarding the increasing diversity in the doses administered by the Waco McLennan County Public Health Clinic. In clinic week 13, we saw 58% of the doses going to white, non-Hispanic, which is another 5 percentage points down from week 12 and certainly much lower than our prior seen ranges of 60 to 80% of the dosage going to white, non-Hispanic. Final note on this IR, we do have a ways to go still to reach herd immunity and certainly need the public's help in registering vaccines at covidwaco.com. And that'll conclude my comments on this IR.
This is Holmes. I'll make a quick comment. Bradley, thanks. Thanks for that. And thanks for LaShonda for putting this together too. Just 2 quick observations. I really appreciate the better diversity, because I know that was one of the challenges early on, and it was, you know, the hit rate was miserable. And so I'm glad to see improvement there. To make sure it gets to all citizens. The second thing is maybe a broader statement, and I see LaShonda is on, I think, and maybe just and it's a word of encouragement for people who maybe like me, who don't want to jump line. I would rather see people who really need it get the shot, and I know that we're all eligible to do it now, but I want to make sure I guess what I'm hearing is you're not really jumping line by getting a shot. You're demonstrating that it's available and everybody can get the shot. So, but I want to hear that encouragement from our public health director if she's available. And I want to make sure I'm thinking straight on that.
Yes, Councilman Holmes, you're absolutely right that, well, let me make sure I understand what you just said. You should get in line ASAP, first of all. So if you haven't been in line, go ahead and get in line. So at this point, we're past the possibility of you jumping in line for somebody that's really at risk. We've had a pretty big chunk of our 1A and 1B population be vaccinated. Thankfully, not only to the great work that our staff internally has been doing, but also the hub provider with Essentia Providence and Waco Family Medicine offering vaccine as well. So we have a lot of vaccine in the community. So now it's your time, Councilman Holmes. So with that being said, I look forward to seeing you soon.
I'll go offline right now and go sign up. No, I appreciate it. And Ms. Marley Hart, thanks also for all you've done in the last month. It seems like you've been part of the team now forever, but I know that you've been working hard to get up to speed on all this. And again, appreciate your management.
It's been fast, but it's been good. And thank you all for all the support you've offered as well over this first month. And thanks to Deidre for great guidance. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Before you hop off, if you could let me know, let us know. I know we have begun the process with getting the actual vaccines in the community. Can you speak to that a little bit? Where we are in the mobile clinics and moving forward, because I know that we're in process, and I am greatly appreciative for all staff involved in getting this, because I know we had really been trying to meet people where they are, especially those who are homebound and just may not have the ability to move around even to our clinic, which is centrally located. So can you speak to that, please?
So we did partner with Meals on Wheels last week to do a clinic at the Sol Ross Senior Center. And while we didn't get as much participation as we anticipated, the good news was that a bulk of their clientele had already been vaccinated. So there are a lot of senior adults that are considered homebound that have already been maybe for a physician's office appointment or have gotten a vaccine in another way. So we do have several other outreach clinics that we're trying to get planned. Today, we got a star request filled for some staff from the National Guard, basically to bring us some medical staff to assist with vaccinations. So we'll be able to expand our footprint by offering clinic services 5 days a week, probably starting early next week, using one of our city facilities. We're not exactly sure where yet, but we will be communicating that with you all as soon as we get the details worked out. But we're on our way. I mean, it's just a lot of moving parts, a lot of planning, and hopefully we can keep people getting vaccinations. And we did get some Johnson & Johnson vaccine, because I know that's been a big question. We did get some Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Okay. So we're working on ways to make sure that those that really would have a hard time getting back for that second dose get those vaccines. So we got a lot of planning going. It's lots of plans happening behind the scenes.
Excellent. That all sounds fantastic, and I'm glad to hear it. So thank you for the update.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bearfield.
Also just want to make a quick note on what Councilman Holmes said. For those of us that haven't got the vaccine yet and want to be cognizant of our vulnerable neighbors, this is a great opportunity for us to help sign friends and family members and church members up on these wait lists, whether it's through either of our hubs of Ascension Providence or the Public Health District, or through these national pharmacy chains. HEB, CVS, Walgreens all have access to vaccines. So every vaccine that we get into an arm of a McLennan County resident helps boost our sense of herd immunity and gets us closer to herd immunity, which isn't a magical flip or switch that we'll be able to flip, but just an encouragement to be your brother and sister's keeper until we get those numbers higher up.
And I'm grateful for all of us who have led. And, I know I fell in a particular category. This is not one of those times when you're ever excited to be on that 1B list, but I was like, ooh, sign up. But, I think we are at a position as leadership to really set a precedent and tone. I mean, I understand some people are just not shot vaccine folks. and that's all well and good. But I think that, you know, as we are signing up those people who are in our neighbors and being our brother and sister's keeper, let us all, you know, we've made the commercials, we've done the PSAs, you know, I'm gonna encourage us that as we get ready to consider moving in person and meeting, that we get vaccinated.
I just want to add the Public Health District has just done such a wonderful job in the operation of rolling out the vaccine. So grateful. Everyone who receives a vaccine from the Public Health District or one of these Ascension Providence specialty clinics just raves about the experience. My wife and I were called off a wait list for the MCC vaccine clinic, and it was just a tremendous experience with student nurses involved. And so I wanted to give a kudos to the Public Health District, to MCC. I know Baylor is vaccinating its people as well, but thank you so much. This has really been a community effort. And Ms. Marley Horn, you have done a wonderful job just picking this up and running with it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman. It has been a community-wide effort, and to walk into a community that already had wonderfully established partnerships and relationships was definitely a relief. And student nurses are a godsend for sure. So we appreciate them. They got some great training. They should know how to give a baby a shot now.
That's right. That's right.
Good. Our second IR today, Council, is a follow-up report on neighborhood engagement activities. If you'll recall, we had a work session led by Millette Harrison on January 5th, outlining our Office of Neighborhood Engagement strategies that they had already deployed, as well as what was coming. And a quick note on the IR, we do have an addition. We weren't quite ready when this went to publication on Thursday afternoon with the Spanish version of the neighborhood handbook on the website. But since that time, it has been uploaded and is available in English and Spanish on the city website under the neighborhood engagement page. So feel free to take a look at that. It's a rich amount of resources for our neighborhoods. On the agenda today, Councilmember Holmes, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. And again, I'm a big fan of strong neighborhood associations, and I appreciate the work that Millette did here. And I particularly like some of the new ideas that she's incorporated into her. And it's a great read here. A couple of 3 pages that you summarized her work, or she summarized her work. I like the idea of bringing those neighborhood association heads together in sort of a citywide, you know, just meeting what's going on and what are your priorities, how are you thinking? I think it's just a great idea. And then just bring a good organization, better organization as we come out of this COVID, you know, pandemic, where we are, maybe there's been a level of reluctance in the Zoom meetings are a little bit too hard to participate in. I just think this is good work that we're doing now, kind of at the tail end of the COVID situation, where this summer we can be in full implementation on these new neighborhood association initiatives. And that the Office of Neighborhood Engagement, again, is doing great work. I've got a couple that are Mountain View Neighborhood Association is just right in my neighborhood here, trying to get launched. The first meeting next week. China Spring Neighborhood Association is trying to reset up their meetings. I know that some neighborhood associations have been going through the pandemic, which is marvelous too. But I think the timing is good here to get this relaunched. And I appreciate the staff creating a new focus on supporting these initiatives.
I would like to echo Council Members Holmes' sentiments. You know, I'm very excited about this project. I think it is, we've been waiting on this for a long time, and I'm so excited that under the direction of City Manager Ford and Deputy City Manager Emerson, that this is coming to fruition. I think this is just another, we have seen an increase in desiring to want to participate in local government and local entities. And so I know that boards and commissions, sometimes there's not slots available for people to sign up, but neighborhood associations are a great way to introduce our own community to the things that are going on in your backyard. And so I'm so excited that this is coming forth, and I know that there's just going to be great things. I've already heard about the great synergy that's taking place from Millette and her staff already with the neighborhood associations. And so I just want to say congratulations and kudos on launching this program.
Also, we love to see it in Spanish. So thank you, city staff, for getting that in Spanish quickly and onto the website. That's a huge win.
We're starting to, we learn each time we work through a process, and it's getting very close to being right at the same moment as English. So I look forward to that day as well. Thank you all for the encouragement on the neighborhood engagement strategy. I think as we look forward, I think there's much to be gained as well, and I look forward to that progress continuing in the months ahead. We do have 12 public hearings on the agenda today. 11 of those, Clint Peters, our Director of Development Services, will review during his work session presentation in a few moments. And then the 12th, Rainesha Hudnall, our Interim Director of Community Services, will cover later in the business session. She is available for questions now. If you do have questions on that item, it's public hearing 2021-191, and it's regarding an amendment to our consolidated plan and action plan regarding the usage of CDBG CARES Act resources. As noted in the agenda item, staff put together a community-based team to recommend the allocation of approximately $929,000 for specific purposes like workforce training and expansion of broadband access, summer educational programming, scholarships to child care centers, as well as direct funding to Mission Waco and Salvation Army for their 24/7 shelter care. So at this time, if you do have questions for Rainesha, she is on the line, or we can continue forward. Your call. Everybody's reaching, so it looks like, who wants to go first?
Are there any council members that have questions for Rainesha?
Sorry, this is Holmes. It wasn't unmuted there. Rainesha, thanks for putting this together. And this is, I like the process we went through here about bringing people together, figuring out how to best utilize this funding source. What I wanted to talk about, and it's near and dear to I think this council's heart, is the broadband. How to improve the broadband for the city. And I know I'm just trying to better understand context, and maybe this isn't. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but for a total solution to broadband, is that a $40 million problem? Or I know 400,000 gets us, it takes steps, but it doesn't get us all the way there, obviously. But and I like the fact that we're at least getting this on the radar and spending real money to come up with the solution here. But as we look at this and other CARES funding and ARP funding that we might be looking at in the next few months, how broadband fits in, I appreciate you just getting it on the radar so it gets into the community discussion here.
I really also want to applaud the efforts in our child care grant programs. I know that there's a lot of communities that will touch and that will render aid. I will echo Councilmember Holmes in that we've been in proximal discussion about what broadband expansion looks like for our city, whether that be Wi-Fi in particular areas, whether that's a more innovative approach and partnering with a neighboring industry leader who may or may not have functioned with satellites and have put broadband in rural communities before. So I'm really excited about what is about to come. I think that as we go forth and looking at what and the monies that we have, what makes the most fiscal sense for us is one point, major. But I want us to make sure that if our intention is to ease the burden of deficiencies in the internet within communities that are troubled, by that's what we do first. So that's just my request in that.
I wonder if in this larger broadband conversation, it's time for us to either in a work session or outside of council convene stakeholders from across the community to address this. And some conversations I've had with community partners, it just seems like there's a lot of subject matter expertise that we need to have at the table. So I know Assistant City Manager Holt, you have really carried this for us as a city. So be curious to hear your input there. The other thing that this whole list is just phenomenal, and love the way that this process is really participatory, and this shift that we're seeing in decisions to be much more participatory and seeking input from throughout the community. I wonder if that $75,000 amount for the upskill program is a little low. I think as a council, we really value this upskilling and workforce development idea, and I imagine that we could see a lot more bang for our buck if that amount was potentially doubled or tripled. So wanted to put that on the radar as well.
Councilwoman Palmer, I think that the $75,000, for context for the public, I think it's like $2,000 per person that gets trained under that program. So it really is not, I kind of imagine that as a pilot program, and as it shows success, it hopefully grows and finds new partners here at the city, county, and potentially our foundation partners to really put some energy behind it. And as you said, put some additional dollars behind it.
Even corporate, because if it would make sense to,
Sure.
help further their own workforce. So, I mean, I can imagine that we would get some corporate engagement with that, but there are lots of opportunities, many hands to make this work lighter, many financial hands to make this work lighter. But I think it's imperative that we do what we need to do to set the precedent.
That's right. That's right.
I wonder too, if in our larger conversations that we're about to have on council with funding, if that could be something we consider as part of our economic incentive policies, that there is some of this buyback or some financial investment in programs like this as part of playing ball with the city of Waco and getting tax abatement or grants from us.
I do appreciate the breakdown that staff has provided for where this $930,000 is going to go. As most of my council members have said, broadband infrastructure, I think we all realize that it's much needed in our community and in favor of it. One thing that I'm very happy to see here is some money going towards childcare centers. If it's one thing that became apparent through COVID, is the need for quality childcare centers, and I'm so glad that staff has taken this initiative and really putting some money aside to see how we can make it better in our community for our moms and dads that are working and need that quality childcare. So I'm glad to see that. I'm also very glad to see the partnerships that we have with the different organizations. One thing that I think of is previously council has asked for, follow up on reports or some measurable goals that we've achieved with organizations that we help fund or help fund certain programs or certain initiative that they're having. And so I would really like for us to visit that again. If it's 75,000 going to the employment training program, what does that look like, and more details involved in that? If it's 50,000 going in Transformation Waco, what program are they launching or initiative? And please, I don't want anyone to mistake that I'm saying that I'm not in favor of this, because that's not the case. But I think it helps us as a council determine, as Councilmember Palmer said, do we need to put more money in this bank or this initiative or this program that a group is offering? And so I would definitely love for us to revisit that again as a council and staff, of following up on programs that we help launch and fund.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments about the public hearing? City Manager Ford, I'll give it to you.
Sure. Thanks, Rainesha, for joining us for that conversation. We do have 23 resolutions on the agenda today, and I'm going to highlight kind of 3 topic areas, a total of 5 of the resolutions. The first I wanted to highlight is Resolution 2021-206. And it's really, a positive step forward into public facing electric vehicle charging stations in the downtown area. And the tactic we're using here is to use the competitive sealed proposal method to solicit bids from companies that would be willing to work with the city to add EV stations downtown. And these would be public EV stations. This resolution follows a couple of actions by the city of Waco this year to really try and create a more sustainable future, including acquiring a couple of sedan EVs in the fleet this year and adding some non-public charging stations. So if the public, wants to engage in that conversation further, we do always point them to our energy guidance document that was approved late in 2020 for further detail.
This is Holmes. Bradley, I'll echo you a little bit on that. I think it's great that we are, this is something that the council's been talking about, trying to figure out how to get EV stations into the city, and if we're the kind of the first mover in this, and how it helps the rest of the community and the rest of the EV users. And again, you pointed to some things that we've done in the last couple of years on council relative to the energy guidance document, where we inventoried everything we have, our entire fleet, our entire building system, and inventory, and what part of that can benefit from renewable energy, and so a new look at sustainability. So I know the technology moves so quickly in this field too, and I appreciate staff's awareness and making council aware of the latest. Every time a new car comes up to buy, we're seeing the electric version, the hybrid version, the cost, the benefit, and it helps me anyway get better associated with what the latest technology is, which I don't think we were doing 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. So anyway, I think this is a great next step. Excited about having EV charging stations in the community.
I do want to echo Council Members Holmes once again sentiments. I believe that this is a great move on behalf of the city. So I really would want to recognize and give kudos to the city staff for including this. I know that sustainability and making our city smart is definitely a goal of many of our council members. And so it's exciting to see that we're coming up with creative ways on how we can bring this type of infrastructure to our city and still being fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money. So I really want to give kudos to our city staff for coming up with this concept, and I'm excited to see the companies that will bid on it and eventually see these charging stations in downtown Waco, not only in that area but all parts of the city. So thank you for that.
Thanks, council members. The next set of resolutions I wanted to highlight are resolutions 2021-207 and 208. These are presented as ratifications for the emergency repair of approximately 50 public water main breaks during the winter storm in February. These expenditures were absolutely necessary in our water leak mitigation strategy to ensure we could keep our system's pressure adequate to keep water flowing to all our customers. And I just want to say a special thanks to both the water team in utilities, but also the vendors, quality contractors, and CSP utilities for their work. It really saved us from moving into more difficult circumstances related to our water availability. The next set of resolutions to highlight are resolutions 2021-212 and 213. They represent a wholesale water contract as well as an associated construction agreement between the City of Waco and FHLM Water Supply Corporation. Upon the completion of these items, it'll allow for the blending of Waco water with well water in eastern McLennan County to meet the TCEQ and EPA standards on the level of arsenic in the water supply in that rural area. FHLM will act as a wholesaler of water and provide water out all the way to Axtell Water Supply Corporation, as well as Elk Oak Lake Water Supply Corporation. These items really represent a few years worth of water planning, and they're a real win for improved water quality in McLennan County. And it really shows how Waco can step up and kind of fulfill its designated role as a regional water provider and partner in solving complicated challenges related to water access.
Bradley, this is Holmes again. Yeah, I'll comment on this. The arsenic problem in the eastern part of our county has been an issue for a really long time. There's been elements of there that are, not optimal, obviously. So this, I think, is a great program. It shows that we want to get. We have a great source of, we have a great source here in Waco with our lake and our water supply, and our willingness to share that, and in places where it makes a lot of sense, and get it out to the eastern part of McLennan County. I think it's a great partnership, and looking forward to getting their water supply back in shape.
All right, and then ordinances wise, we don't have any on the agenda today. And if there's no further questions, that concludes my report.
Mayor and council, I wanted to let you know that I distributed an updated attachment for boards and commission appointments for resolution 193. The only difference is we've added one more appointment, Andy Padillo, to the Building Standards Commission. This was a mayor at large appointment that's been distributed and will be included in minutes in the official record.
Thank you so much. Are there any items council would like to remove from the consent agenda? Esmeralda, are there any items that we need to remove for public comment? Any resolutions?
Yes, sir. At this time, we have a 206 and 200 to be removed from the consent agenda. And those are for public speakers, plus the 209 that was removed from staff.
Wonderful. The consent agenda includes resolutions 2021-192 through 2021-214, with the exception of resolution 2021-200, 2021-206, and 2021-209. I will now ask the city manager, Bradley Ford, to introduce our first work session.
Mayor Pro Tem, we'll call the first work session is work session 2021-173, which is a discussion of the planning public hearing agenda items, and we'll add Clint Peters to the discussion here, our Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Good afternoon. We do have 11 public hearings for consideration tonight. The first one is dealing with our one subdivision plat, final plat and construction plans for Foxborough 2 Edition, Phase 9. This is a subdivision that's been developing out over the past 7-8 years in the China Spring area of our city limits along Tree Lake Drive in Arnett. Phase 9 is the second to last phase of this subdivision. Includes 33 acres and 113 lots, which is about a little under 3.5 units an acre. Lots range in size from 60 feet up to 70 feet in width, and depth 120 to 130 feet. There is a drainage channel through this property that separates Phase 9 and a future Phase 10. You can see the connection to the north of the map, to Tree Lake Drive, and then connection back into the existing Foxborough subdivision. There's also a pretty major sewer line reconstruction, upsize, and relocation that's going to help with capacity issues out in that area that will be built as part of this phase. This is one where the Plan Commission did recommend approval with conditions back in February. The developer submitted a response to those conditions. Staff reviewed those. They met all those conditions. And it fell under the what we call the shot clock rule that the state put in place a couple of years ago, where the Plan Commission has 15 days to respond once a developer resubmits a plat. We were unable to get the Plan Commission meeting scheduled within that 15-day period, so it does move forward to the council with a recommendation of approval. As I mentioned, it their resubmittal did meet all the plat requirements put in place by the Plan Commission, and staff has reviewed those and is recommending approval to council. The next public hearing is 21-181. This is a public hearing on a short-term rental type 1 and R1B zoning at 2901 Parrott Avenue. This is a short-term rental is a owner-occupied residential property where short-term rental can be provided to one group at a time. The owners do have to be on site at time of rental to the tenants. This is at the corner 29th and Parrott on Dean Highland neighborhood. Highland Baptist Church is just to the north of it. R1B zoning. You can see there, this is the map that shows other approved STRs in the area and their buffers. STR1s are allowed within 500 feet of other ones. They don't have the buffer requirement that you see with the STR2s and bed and breakfast homestays, which have the buffer requirements. So this is a property the owners do live in the house, the main house. They have a guest home and that one-bedroom guest home, and that's what they're proposing to rent out for the STR.
Clint, can I ask you a quick question on that?
Sure.
It showed overlapping circles. Is that because essentially those circles got larger as the ordinance changed, like they were pre-existing?
So when you look at these, so for the SDR2s where you have one, if you look at it, they're centered in there. So they're not, the actual property that's being rented out is not within a 500-foot buffer of another STR, but the buffers are overlapping. So
okay, got it.
yeah. So the buffers can overlap, just not that the STR can't be located in that buffer.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Sure. We mailed out 22 notices on this, and we just had one returned in favor of the request. Plan Commission did recommend approval of this one, 8-0. And the next one is another STR. This is a type 2 at 2112 Mildred Street. This is a new construction single family home in South Waco. Mildred is a single family neighborhood south of Gurley Lane. You can see the South Waco Elementary School, South Waco Library just there off of Gurley Lane. This is in the Alta Vista Neighborhood Association, like I said, 3-bedroom new construction. This is a SDR2, so this would, the owner would not be living on site. It would be rented out to one group at a time, but the designated operator would be living somewhere else. There is a 3-bedroom, so there's a requirement to have 3 parking spaces. They'll have to verify that they have 3 spaces on site before they can get their SDR license. We mailed out 20 notices on this one and no opposition on this one. You can see the picture of the home and then up and down the street on Mildred.
Hey, Clint, do you know if the applicant will be at the business session this evening?
I am not. Esmeralda, did we have anybody sign up to speak on this one?
You're on mute, Esmeralda.
Sorry, what item number was this?
This is 182.
182.
No, we don't have anyone registered to speak for the item.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to check. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Plan Commission did recommend approval on this one by a vote of 7-1. The next one is another STR type 2 at 2329 Columbia Street. This is another single family home in South Waco in our Kendrick neighborhood. Columbia and Elliott is the nearest intersection just north of I-35. Another 3-bedroom home located in single family zoning. The owner does live in Waco and manage the SDR, but does not live on the property. You can see there's no other SDRs in the area. There's one SDR1 across the highway on Alta Vista, but none within the buffer. They have plenty of parking to meet the requirements for 3 parking spaces. We did mail out 27 notices and had 2 returned with no comments. And Plan Commission recommended approval of this one by a vote of 7-1 on this one as well. The next public hearing, 184, is at 1620 Baylor Avenue. This is for a short-term rental type 3. The type 3 is a multifamily residential property where lodging is provided to one group per dwelling unit. In this case, it is a small 5-unit complex. Each unit has 1 bedroom at the corner of 17th and Baylor near I-35. This property was recently renovated, actually still in the process of renovating it. See multifamily zoning there. No other STRs within 500 feet of it. And you can see the property there, they do have 12 parking spaces, so it meets the parking requirement for STRs. And then here's the unit. So there is just 5 units in this. So they're proposing all 5 of them be rented out for STRs, which is the limit that we have in our license ordinance for maximum number of STRs in a multifamily project. No opposition on this one, and Plan Commission recommended it by a vote of 8-0.
Hey, Clint, on this one, so there's only 5 units in this complex, correct?
Correct.
And they're all 1 bedrooms?
They're all 1 bedroom, yes, sir.
So how big is each unit, for lack of better? I mean, it must be good size then?
Yeah, let me see. Well, let me take it up if it has it on there. I'll have to look. I believe they have square footage in some of their documentation. I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but I can get that information for you.
Okay. And the reason I asked is because on the outside, it looks a lot bigger than just 5 1-bedroom units, you know, and so I was just curious about that.
Let me get that information and I can provide it to you.
Okay.
Before tonight's hearing. I do believe that's in the packet of information. I'm just not able to pull it up right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
The next public hearing, 185, is a zone change request on 3 properties on North 5th Street, 212, 214, and 220 North 5th Street. It's 3 different property owners that joined in on this application, rezoned from R2 to O3. The total of the 3 properties is about 7/10 of an acre. You can see this portion of the block is near Herring Avenue. You can see the Waco Zoo over here and Cameron Park to the north. It does have a medium density residential office flex, which is a mixed use land use designation that allows numerous mixed use zoning districts, residential office, and some limited commercial. You can see on here, this block is zoned R2, and you can see there's the pink and colors are office zoning O2 and then some O3 across the street. The original request came from the property owner at 2020 North 5th Street, which is the corner property, which is a 2-story house. And then after talking with the neighbors, both of the neighbors joined in on the application. So it's these 3 homes here. And you can see each individual one. We did have, from the notices, we did not get any responses from the 200 feet, but we did get a response from Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association in opposition of this change. Their main concern is that O3 would potentially open it up to short-term rentals. The existing R2 zoning allows short-term rentals, but they cannot be within 500 feet of another STR. But with the change to O3, that buffer requirement goes away. So that's their concern, is that the zone change would open it up to short-term rentals. Staff, when we receive zone change requests, we have to consider and look at all the permitted uses in a zoning district and make our decision on whether that zoning district is appropriate for the area it's located in. And with Fifth Street being a mixed-use corridor, major street, we felt like 03 was an appropriate district, but we did want to pass along that opposition from Brook Oaks neighborhood.
Can
Plan
you go
Commission,
back to the, sorry, what the other zoning was around it? Can you show me that again?
sure. So the property is R2, which is this orange color. You can see
Mm-hmm.
pretty much everything back, into the neighborhood is the R2
Mm-hmm.
zoning, which allows single family and duplexes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pink color where you see up and down 4th and 5th Street is
Mhm.
O2 zoning, which allows office uses all the way from single family up to multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
And then this purplish color is the O3 where you have it across the street. And the O3 is single family, duplexes, and then office, and then some limited commercial uses. And then you do have some just general, that red color is general commercial, where you have those two commercial buildings at the corner.
Mm-hmm. Right down the corner. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Clint, this is Kelly. At the latest Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association meeting, some of the reticence voiced was that historically there was a move away from addressing some of the quilt work or the patchwork zoning throughout the neighborhood, and fear that this is kind of moving back into that spot zoning reality. Can you speak to just some of the history of what zoning in this area has looked like in recent years?
Sure. So the 4th and 5th Street corridor, one thing we look at when we're making zoning decisions is our future land use plan. So you can see here that the 4th and 5th Street corridor has that medium density residential office flex, which is a more mixed use area where you do encourage mixed use, whether it be residential, office, even limited commercial. And then when you get back into the neighborhood, you can see that yellow, which is urban residential, which is geared more towards your traditional residential zoning and neighborhoods. And then off the map, we have some of those corridors that go into the neighborhood, like Colcord and 15th and Bosque, that do have some commercial zoning, mixed use zoning in it. But so moving forward, we've used this plan more diligently to make zoning changes, but there have been some zoning decisions in the distant past that that have happened, that once a property is rezoned, it stays that zoning until there's another zoning decision. So that's where sometimes you get that patchwork zoning, and especially zoning decisions that were made pre-1986, which was our last major zoning rewrite, where we went away from cumulative zoning. Used to, if you had M2 zoning, which is industrial, you were allowed everything from industrial all the way down to single family residential. And in 1986, we went away from that and have more use-based zoning districts. And so that's where you see sometimes in the older areas where you have that patchwork. In this specific case, because it is on the 4th and 5th Street corridor, because that is identified in our future land use plan to be a mixed use, you will see some general different zoning districts, from block to block, and that's okay. That meets the criteria for not being spot zoning when you have that situation.
Okay, and one more follow-up question, and Jennifer, please cut me off if this is not an appropriate question, but it kind of feels like this is potentially circumventing our STR boundary ordinance. Clint, what do you think that, are you picking up with what I'm putting down?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, and that's why, you need to consider it. STR is one thing that we need to consider, but, we have to consider everything, because once it's changed, it could, anything that's permitted in that zoning district is allowed, whether it's, the existing single family homes that are allowed to, those could convert to an office or, a small retail use, or potentially an STR. So, I think as long as you make your decision based on considering all the uses allowed in that O3 zoning, you can make a decision based on that, whether for or against. And so, it's not for a specific use. It's, consideration should be for all those permitted uses.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Glenn.
Potential uses, sure.
And so I'm asking these questions like I don't see this one particular block every day. It's proximal. It's in my drive. So my question is I know that these three neighbors have come together because this is one block, and said that this is a direction that they want to go for whatever reason. So that part I don't know, right? And the potential that this rezoning means that there is a kind of a broad option that this one block could be. And if I remember correctly, on the other side of that is a business. I'm trying to think, because in that block, I don't think that there are any other houses around it, if I'm correct.
Correct. The property on the corner
Is vacant,
is
right?
vacant. Yeah, and my understanding, they did talk to that property owner about joining the application.
Mm-hmm. And the block before that is business. It's commercial.
Right up on Herring.
At Herring. Okay. Okay.
But you can see from the pictures it is a mix.
Yeah.
And there's been some new residential built. They're brand new
right across the street. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Holmes, just jumping in, really on that same map. Just seeing us ship away. I think there should be a pretty high bar for changing residential. And maybe this meets it. I don't know. I got to think through this. Because it's residential and there's something across the street, sure. But if you go to the colored map there again, the orange and that one, it just seems to me like we're kind of coming across and potentially, spreading that. What is across the street there on? Again, did we? What's in that purple right now?
It's a single family home there, and there's actually an outbuilding on site that they use for some limited commercial.
It's just zoned 03.
Yes, sir.
You know how long ago that got changed to 03, or is that always 03?
It's been pretty recent. It's been within the last year that changed.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, the next case, 186, is a request at 1301 Daughtry Avenue. This is the rezone from R2 to R3C. This property is about a little over half acre, located at Daughtry and 13th, near Baylor campus, LaSalle Avenue to the south here. This is that area that has been redeveloping for a lot of student housing over the last 20, 25 years. Again, this is an area that's designated as that medium density residential. You can see 12th Street is kind of the dividing line where you have higher density residential back towards campus. And then there's this area between 12th and 17th, 18th Street corridor, which is medium, and then you transition out to the yellow, which is more lower density as you get further out. With that land use pattern, you can see that the zoning is starting to fill in with more medium density zoning. R3C is a medium density zoning where you have your higher density zoning, O2, which can go up to 40 units an acre, closer to campus. And then again, as the farther you get out, it stays that lower density R2 zoning. This is the home. It is an existing home, and then some land around it. And then you can see kind of the development pattern where you have more duplexes and fourplexes and small apartments that have more of a residential feel than large apartment complexes in that area. This is also located in the College and University Neighborhood District. And this is a good example of some of those standards that are in place that provide higher quality development, where the parking is located in the rear of the building and you have front porch and some architectural design features on it. And then looking down the other way where you see some of those developments. We mailed out 20 notices on this one and just received one back in favor. And the Plan Commission did recommend approval on this one, 8-0. The next one is a rezoning at 6251 Bagby Avenue from M2 to C2, industrial to commercial zoning. This is about a 4-acre tract out in the industrial Texas Central Parkway Park Industrial District near the intersection of Texas Central and Bagby. Currently, it has land use plan for office industrial flex, which does allow some commercial zoning. And you can see M2 zoning here. This rezoning is associated with a proposed annexation on this adjacent tract 2. That's 3 acres. There's actually an annexation service agreement on the agenda tonight for council's consideration, and then the actual annexation and zoning of this property will be coming to council at the next council meeting, requesting the same C2 zoning. But the idea here is that you would have some acreage for future potential development, for commercial development that would serve the industrial district with all the new industrial development. There is a need to have some retail commercial type uses to serve that area. And you can see here is a picture. This is Texas Central down here, and then Bagby going off there. And this is that area we're talking about, kind of that triangle area between those two major streets. No responses on this one out of 10 notices, and the Plan Commission recommended 8-0 on this one. The next public hearing, 188, is 2 properties out on China Spring Road to rezone from O3 to C2. Each property is about 9/10 of an acre, total 1.8 acres. This is in the kind of the commercial, heart of the commercial area along China Spring Road. You can see where they've been there. This is a vacant lot that the applicant proposed, and then the city expanded it to include a developed lot for O'Reilly's that's already been developed. Mixed use flex, and then O3, you can see the development pattern along there has all been C2 zoning where that commercial development is. These properties were zoned O3, and then there's a strip of O3 that's located between the commercial development and then this single family neighborhood to keep a buffer from those higher intensity commercial uses and then the low density residential. And so this zone change brings the commercial properties in line with the zoning along the frontage, but keeps that buffer there. And you can see it a little bit closer up. It's about 85 feet deep that you'll have that buffer between the commercial uses. And then here's a picture of the vacant lot. You can see the O'Reilly's there. The change to C2 would bring the O'Reilly's into conformance with the zoning district. The current O3 doesn't allow the O'Reilly's at the hours of operation that they're currently doing. So it does bring them into conformance, and then they would allow commercial development on this vacant lot while keeping that buffer between the homes you see there in the back. And then this is just looking back towards China Spring Road where you have the apartments, and this is that buffer area we're talking about. No opposition on this one. We did mail out 16 notices on this one, and Plan Commission recommended approval. And then our last zoning change request is a full block between Cleveland Avenue and Ross Avenue along Levitt Street for rezoning from C3 to O2. This block is about almost 2 acres, 1.75 acres. And you can see it there in that area that's been redeveloping rapidly over the past 5 to 10 years as a downtown and the I-35 corridor kind of grew together. This is in that area where we have mixed use flex. And then you can see this is one of the last commercial properties along that 11th Street corridor. As this area has transitioned, everything from Cleveland back towards the interstate has been more commercial development, and then Cleveland towards downtown has been more of the higher density residential development, office development there. So this change from C3 to O2 would be in line with that transition that's been happening in the area. There are some current commercial buildings on that property, and then some vacant lots. We did mail out 20 notices on this one and had no opposition. And the Plan Commission did recommend this by a vote of 8-0. And then our last public hearing is an abandonment of a portion of a Woodcrest Drive right-of-way. Woodcrest is a small street that connects between Cobb's and a Fish Pond Drive in West Waco. You see Valley Mills up to the north there. The right-of-way of Woodcrest goes straight there, but the actual street doglegs and connects there. And so there's some extra right-of-way that's not being used. That's just grassed area that the adjacent property owner would like to incorporate in their property so they can expand an office use there. They would like to use some of that area for parking. There's no public need for that to ever be a street because of the way Woodcrest connects in the Cobbs. We do have a water line in there, so we are asking to retain an easement for that water line, but otherwise we recommend approval of this. No public comment from our notices, and Plan Commission does recommend approval. And you can see that kind of that grassy area right there is what we're talking about. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. And at this time, I will hand it over to our mayor, Mayor Meek.
Do the meetings not start at 3 still? Just kidding. Sorry I was late, everybody. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sabito, for covering for me. Was able to greet our Baylor men's basketball team back into Waco at the airport. And so exciting moment for our city, and really thankful for y'all allowing me to break away and do that, and conducting the important business of the city this first hour. So now we'll move on to our next work session item. City Manager Ford, what is your preference for the next agenda item?
We'll go in order. We'll go with work session 2021-174, if that suits you. That is the discussion of in-person council meetings for this Waco City Council, as well as for the city's boards and commissions. I'm going to be making the presentation today, and primarily it's going to be a discussion for the council. So I'll introduce and then allow y'all to have a moment to discuss. Council members, you'll recall a couple weeks ago, my office released a 3-phase plan for COVID reopening, which obviously created an expectation upon when city facilities would reopen, when events could happen on city property, and also when the city council and boards and commissions might consider meeting again in person. Given our level of COVID activity and vaccine dosage in the community, we're currently at phase 1 in that 3-phase plan. Phase 1 allows us to consider in-person city council meetings in a hybrid format, meaning the council members and a limited number of staff would be in person in the Bosque Theater, while the public would still watch and engage online through a virtual format. I scheduled this work session to really receive your feedback on how quickly you'd like our team to plan for in-person hybrid meetings. It's interesting. The last time we had an in-person city council meeting was a special session on March 31st of 2021. So you can imagine, after working the past 20 plus council meetings on Zoom in a virtual format, we want a little bit of time to prepare and test for a new hybrid format. Additionally, I'd like the team to have adequate time to consider COVID appropriate protocols for the Bagby Theater, as well as potentially modifications to ensure physical distancing in the room. Regarding boards and commissions, phase one does allow for the consideration of allowing boards and commissions to meet similarly. But given the number of boards and commissions, the members, as well as the staff liaisons that we have, my recommendation would be at this time to only use the hybrid format for city council meetings and keep boards and commissions meeting virtually for the time being. This will give us time, give the staff time to evaluate how the hybrid in-person approach works before extending that option to other boards and commissions. But once we do have a good feel of how the meetings work, we can look at adding additional meetings to the list for those that are eligible. And that'll give us time to train the staff liaisons, as well as ensure each of those locations are appropriate for in-person meetings. At this time, I'd like to open the discussion, open the floor to the council, and seek your guidance for the city staff regarding the timing of if and when you'd like to start these in-person hybrid city council meetings.
All right, let's have some discussion. Any questions or comments, council?
This is Holmes. I guess I'll kick it off. Did anybody else? Okay, yeah. I'm in favor of getting back in person as quick as we can, and if that's the hybrid stage first, supportive. There's just these meetings are good, and we're able to talk, and we're able to communicate, and we're able to function and get the administrative things done, which we've done a lot of in the last year. But I can't wait till we can all get back together in the same room. And it seems like we're very close. So I don't want to get clumsy with getting there. So yeah, let's try out. To me, the sooner the better. I think the Bagby Theater creates an environment where we can spread out, and I guess that would be the case where we'd spread out and have barriers and that sort of thing. I know that I see other cities and counties have kind of tried to start doing some form of that. So yeah, I'm in favor of getting it going as reasonably quickly as we can. I mean, I feel bad for the new members, KP or Councilmember Palmer and Councilmember Borderud, that we haven't all gotten together. And that part of the serving on this council with staff and with our brethren and on council is just getting together and hashing things out. So I'm looking forward to that day where we can all get back in the same room for sure. So, and whatever we need to do safely to get there, let's get it tracked.
City Manager Ford, thank you for the information you gave. And I apologize if I missed this, so I'm going to ask a question. But did you give a date of when our target date is to go back to this hybrid model that you're referring to?
Certainly, it would be my preference at the earliest, the second meeting in May.
Okay. And I think that's perfectly fine. I wanted to make sure that you guys had, as you requested, staff had ample time to make sure that things were working properly and that you guys had time to prepare as well. And I'm all in favor of slowly transitioning into in-person meetings with the understanding, knowing that hopefully we don't see an increase in case counts. That is the goal, but I also understand that if that is the case, then we will but we will go back to meeting via Zoom. And so I'm all in favor of it.
I think that Councilmember Holmes may have, addressed it and touched on it. And I know that the only people who've been in the Bagby Theater recently are Councilmember Borderud, Palmer, and myself for our swearing in. And at that point, there were barriers, the protective separators on the dais. Am I to assume that will remain?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there are physical modifications as well as other modifications that would create physical distancing that I would like to consider in the room. I'd be happy to provide, as I get the guidance to move ahead, if the council would like kind of a detailed explanation of those protocols and protections, I'd be glad to provide them.
I would. I know that you know that I'm in the travel industry, and I know that the world is very much readied to be back into a state of what we knew as normal. I am also incredibly cautious because y'all know I live with my mother-in-law, and as a senior, and while we're all vaccinated and we're all okay with our own village, that's still we're still very cautious and protective of one another. And I know that we all are also. So while I am absolutely ready to engage and be back in a room with you, I want to make sure that I don't bring back something I didn't leave with. But that's important. And that's the thing. That's the way we are doing what we need to do to make sure that we get to herd immunity, to make sure that we get over the percentage of people who, are being mindful of one another. We can't go with, restricted protocols and things like that because we all have COVID fatigue. And, we are all at a place where if we're going to begin to take a step forward, that we have to be cognizant of those things. So I have no quarrel with, you said the second week in May. I think that would give y'all enough time. I have no quarrel with that. I just want to make sure that we're protecting one another and protecting our city. Because again, if we go down, the business goes down. That's not something we have time for. So you have my support with caution.
With caution, I like that. So let me make one suggestion because our city secretary has informed me we do have an election canvassing, I believe, on May 11th. So that would probably be our first one in person on May 11th. To be followed, of course, by our typical council meeting in May. So
I like that timeline too, because it gives those of us who haven't been vaccinated but are on wait lists enough time to get our first and second dose and then be close to almost being in that fully vaccinated space, unless we get Johnson & Johnson, and then that timeline is shortened. And I share Councilman Barefield's thoughts and hesitancies. I feel very comfortable with being in a group of this size that I feel will be mostly, if not fully vaccinated. I have much more reticence to having anyone in the community have access to be in a enclosed space with shared breathing air. That gives me a lot more pause. So I would be curious to know what that rollout process looks like of who we're letting in and any sort of checks and balances we have there. But the idea of being together in person makes me feel giddy and excited to sit up straight at the days and oops. Dang it, I'm ready to be over these buttons.
Yeah, I will echo all of my esteemed council members' views on this subject. I do think, this can be done cautiously in May. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone in person. And learning more about you individually and collectively. And I've been assured by senior city staff that I will be given a custom-made hazmat suit for this occasion. So I look forward to it.
Josh and his jokes, love it. I think that, when we're talking about these things, it's really important to recognize that there's real benefit, I think, to being able to be in the same room with people. I think that we've done as well as any group could do, but having been in both worlds, it's important to call out the fact that being able to do business together in a room, I think is good for relationship building. I think it's good for trust building, and I think it makes the work of this city more productive. So when we're really balancing things out on a scale with the situation that we're moving into, like Councilmember Palmer said, and I don't know the appropriate way to kind of take inventory of this. I know that, right now we're in a place where all of us are eligible to be vaccinated. And I think if we particularly if the participants of the meeting, the council and the staff have had that opportunity. It's going to be important for us to really move forward and begin to meet again together. I think that, this is an evolving, the doctors are continuing to evaluate this. We're still learning every day about the effectiveness of vaccinations and the amount of spread that can go on between vaccinated people. So I think it's important that we continue to monitor this and review the data in our community. But based on the trends that we're seeing right now, the ability for people to become vaccinated, and what I'm hearing from even the CDC, which I think has said that groups of people of a size like this that have all been vaccinated can meet together. I think it's really important for us to move forward as quick as we can so that we can really, have those productive meetings that I think we all miss. So echo what's been said. I like this timeline and look forward to the day that we're meeting together again.
Thanks, Councilor.
No,
that's perfect. Absolutely. We appreciate that feedback, and we'll be in touch regarding the particulars that have been requested as well ahead of time. So thank you, council members. The last work session we have on the agenda today is work session 2021-175, and it's a discussion of our bus rapid transit preliminary engineering and NEPA progress, as well as specific updates on the construction and operating costs of the BRT, as we call it. We'll be inviting Serena Stevenson, our general manager at Waco Transit, to provide the introduction, and she'll be joined by a couple of team members from AECOM Technical Services who will be guiding us through the presentation today. Serena, welcome to the meeting, and the floor is yours.
Serena, will you let me know the names of those who I need to also add?
Yes, ma'am. Gavin Poindexter, Tim Simon, and Paulette.
Okay, they are all able to join and turn on their cameras if they need to.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, City Manager Ford, and Deputy City Manager Emerson. This presentation will be an update of the financial assessment for Waco's Bus Rapid Transit Corridor Project. In May of 2018, the project justification request presented to council listed the conceptual capital cost range for this project to be between $18.3 to $19.4 million, with an additional $2.4 to $3 million for annual operating costs. As the AECOM team has moved forward in preliminary engineering and details are being considered to scale the project, the estimated capital cost has increased to $30 to $35 million, with a decrease in the annual operating cost to be in the range of $2.3 to $2.8 million per year. Today's overview will summarize the project costs, potential cost savings, and funding scenarios that have been presented during our 2 financial assessment workshops, as well as next steps. Next steps will include the completion of a route realignment study by the MPO, slated to begin within a few months, and that information from the study will provide transportation scenarios to the City of Waco that include the BRT corridor and options that do not. Please know, as discussed with FTA, there is no urgency to withdraw from the project development pipeline currently, as Waco Transit System is 1 year and 8 months into project development, and there is a 3-year timeline to make progress. The next steps to advance the project from a project development standpoint based on input from FTA may include the consideration of other alignments while continuing to identify and secure funding that would be necessary to move forward with a small starts evaluation. I would like to introduce Gavin Poindexter with the AECOM team to begin the BRT presentation.
Thank you much, Serena. So I'm going to start off with an overview of FTA's small starts program so people understand what that program is, and then we'll get into the specifics as how the Waco Transit Systems BRT project is moving forward. First of all, FTA's small starts program is a multi-step, multi-year program that requires FTA to accept a project into what they call project development. And this is really where you figure out what your project is, figure out how you're going to fund it and implement it, and do that design and environmental clearance, or the NEPA process that Serena had mentioned. And then as you're completing project development, you again go back to the FTA for an approval. And at the end of that approval, what you do is you get what's called a small starts grant agreement. And that is what is used to fund the project for its construction and implementation phase of the small starts project. So then we get into what is a small starts project. Well, a small starts project is a transit capital investment project that is focused. It cannot have a total capital cost of more than $300 million, and it cannot be requesting more than $100 million in what we call the capital investment grant funding, or funding through the small starts program. The projects must be a corridor-based investment, so along a single transit line. They must have defined stations, transit signal priority, and or other things that can allow buses to move faster than they would normally in a congested area. And it must have short bidirectional headway. In this case, that would be looking at about 15-minute headways for about 14 hours out of the day. There are also some financial commitments that FTA is looking for, just to make sure that if you're getting this federal funding, that project will be operational and will be able to be supported by the local community. This is going to include us coming up with a financial plan. As part of that financial plan, there's going to be a 20-year cash flow. And so this is where we're going to show FTA how the service, not just the BRT line, but the transit service in the community as a whole, would be funded for the next 20 years from both a capital and operating side. And we need to come up with what those funding commitments are to fund that operation. We also need, FTA also looks at the current financial condition of the transit agency, and that's to make sure that they're a good, sound financial entity. We don't want to be giving large amounts of money to entities that are struggling to keep their house in order, if you will. The proposed, they're also looking at where those funds are coming from and what is that commitment. Have they gotten commitments for that funding that they're promising? And then just also, is this reasonable? Are you assuming that your costs are going to remain flat, or are they going to continue to grow with inflation as it has historically, or are we in line with historical trends on that? And then as we go into the BRT project here, specifically, and what some of those costs are, I first want to back up and talk a little bit about what the current funding for Waco Transit is, so you sort of have that frame of reference for you. So this is kind of just looking at what the funding is for the 2020 budget for WTS. You'll see that a large portion of the funding comes from the federal government, in particular this year. That has gone up even more. So that yellow pie that looks fairly large, those are the formula funding that is used on an annual basis to fund transit here locally. And then that next large pie, that bluish green, if you will, that is the CARES Act transit support funding. And that is something that is a one-time thing that is being used to sort of shore up those funds and resources for this. And that is in response to COVID. And part of that has done is you'll see, you also have contracts with various entities, including Baylor and some of the other schools in Waco, and then some smaller things such as state revenue, fares, and then family advertising. You will see here that the city of Waco is a fairly small pie on this one. I want to state that is because the CARES Act came in and we were able to supplement or replace some of that local share money with additional federal funds. Traditionally, the city of Waco has contributed more to transit in the community. It was closer to about $800,000 in 2018 and about $1.9 million in 2019. And that larger amount does include work for the BRT project that we are discussing today for its current phase. Also, it is, I think, of note that the budget for transit has consistently been growing the last few years, and it has resulted in pre-COVID an increase in ridership. So you are getting that return for those funds you're contributing to your community. But I do just kind of want to put into perspective, you know, if you're in that about little over $8 million range annually, this is funds we're going to have to come up with on that annual basis for the system. Adding the BRT is going to add about $2.3 to $2.8 million to that amount. We have to try to figure out a way to find on an annual basis. When we look at the capital side of the project, and generally FTA is providing somewhere between 50 and 70% of the total capital costs for BRT projects and projects similar to this. So for our project, that's between that $30 and $35 million range. That means we're going to need to come up with between 11 and about $17.5 million from non-federal sources, whether those be local or state. That's part of what we're trying to figure out and work through. I do want to assure you that the $1.2 million that you're currently spending on it is part of that local match. So you have made a substantial contribution to advancing that. It's not, we're looking at closing that gap. It's not that you're starting at zero at this point. I'm going to turn it over to Bill to talk a little bit about what is in that cost estimate and what were some of those things that kind of had that change from the previous phase.
Thanks, Gavin. So we do have 28 stations. That's basically 14 locations with a station pair, one inbound and one westbound. So at each of these locations, we are looking at a various range of investments. We have made some adjustments recently in that instead of making the full investment at all the stations, we do have another scale of investment. So everything along Franklin we have as 40-foot long platforms, and elsewhere in what we call segment A and C are 32-foot long. We do have at Franklin, we do have the 12-inch raised platforms for near level boarding at those locations, and 7-inch elsewhere. So that partly came from the negotiations and discussions with TxDOT. Other features of the stations are that we do have the tactile indicators. We've got docking guide strips on the Franklin portion. And then there's also costs that are associated with the adjacent roadway, whether that's the general resurfacing or full depth reconstruction, particularly a station where we have a raised platform. Each shelter is intended to be pre-manufactured. Though it could be custom made, it would come from one of those places that actually generally manufactures a station. So it would not necessarily be a custom design. And then seating would be included. We would have some sort of power and communications cabinet that would be adjacent, such that we could have things like real-time signs and other features like lighting at the station. And then other costs that we have are on the next slide. These are things such as vehicles. Right now we've got 8 CNG vehicles included in the project. Operator comfort stations, which are pre-manufactured buildings that can be put at the end of line for operators to use the restroom during their layover times. We've got 2 new signalized intersections proposed, and those could be phased in later if needed. But there's also transit signal priority at the existing signalized intersections. Some of those locations, we just want to make sure that we have improvements for the sidewalk connectivity to the stations. Also, there's crosswalks that we're looking at, as well as the wheelchair accessible ramps, sign and pavement markings adjacent to these, and then other things that just come with any kind of roadway construction project. That's maintaining traffic during construction and mobilization for the contractor. So then in the next slide, Gavin was going to explain some of the potential we have for cost savings.
Thank you very much, Bill. So there are really two primary ways that we can look towards cost reductions or cost savings. The first one is going to be to provide a lower level of amenity at some of the stations or at the stations in general. A few of those that we can look at is to provide a standard curb height. One of the things that we're looking at is to provide a level boarding, which would raise the platform up to be at the same level as the bus. And what this does is it allows to speed up the boarding process, also allows for greater accessibility for those who need mobility, who have mobility challenges or devices to get on the platform, reducing or eliminating the need to deploy a ramp at stations. We can do onboard fare collection, and then and both of those things we talked about, those do have ramifications potentially for O&M costs and travel time, as one of the things that both level boarding and onboard fare or offboard fare collection allow you to do is to have the dwell time at stations go down and allow buses to travel faster, therefore needing fewer buses and fewer operators to operate that route on the same headway. Also, real-time information is another thing that we could potentially look at, trying to lower that level of investment in order to make the project more feasible from a cost standpoint. Another way that we could do it is to look at shortening the overall scale of the project and potentially phase the level of investment or the timing of that investment, so that we're looking at, we're going to do that same level of investment we've been talking about, but do it over, just a smaller segment. Maybe it's between Franklin and 35th and MLK, focus those improvements on the downtown, and then we could potentially come back in the future and look at, improvements that we could do either north or south at future times, and just sort of phase the project so that it's happening over possibly a longer period of time, but in a more financially feasible manner. And as we're getting into that, we want to start to look at what some of those funding scenarios are that we've talked about with the working group. So there are a couple of different funding sources that we could be using for both capital and operating, and it is important to kind of keep those in mind, because operating funds are things that we can use, that we need to be thinking about every year. We're going to need to be using these funds. So these are things that we're going to have as reoccurring things, whereas capital, that's a one-time big cost item that we're going to need once, and how do we get to that level? Under operating, we've got fair revenue, general funds, sales taxes, contracts for services, and advertisement. Those are things that are currently in the mix, with the exception of sales tax for WTS, and it would be, can we grow those, and are we willing to try to leverage some of those for additional annual operating costs? And then on the capital side, we could do a general fund. We could implement a TIF district or tax increment financing, which is kind of a property tax on select portion of the community that would be directly benefiting from the improvements. Again, sales tax. We could then use bonding, which would be repaid through any of those means previously discussed. And then looking at federal funding. Previously we talked about the Small Starts Grant Program. That is one path, and we're continuing to move forward down that path. But there's also what's called the Buses and Bus Facilities Grant Program. This is another discretionary grant. So kind of making those choices. It's not a formula program that we could be looking at for the project. And I'll get into both the two federal programs a little bit more in a couple of slides. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is, we've heard various plans in the past of potentially using the planned Franklin Avenue improvements as part of that local match and the construction cost for those improvements, roll those into one and make it a larger project. I want to make sure that you're aware of what that takes to do that. This is an option, but there are, if you're going to use FTA's money, you have to follow their rules, if you will. So what that would be is that would basically be that we are incorporating the existing Franklin Avenue project that you're currently considering into the larger BRT project. This would mean that we need to federalize the Franklin Avenue project. That means that it needs to follow all federal procurement requirements, be cleared through the FTA's NEPA or environmental review process, and that we are moving that forward and getting FTA's approvals before we start spending the money that we want to count as local match as part of that grant. And this could result in delays to the currently being planned and designed Franklin Avenue project. One way that we can kind of mitigate some of those delays would be that we could get what's called a letter of no prejudice from FTA in advance of starting to do that procurement and spending those funds that we would like to have count as non-federal match for a small starts grant. First of all, those parts of the Franklin Avenue project would need to be cleared through NEPA in advance. FTA would need to evaluate and rate the BRT project, make sure that it meets FTA's requirements with the added costs of the Franklin Avenue reconstruction as part of that project. We would have to go through what FTA's review for risk and completeness of materials by what they call a program management oversight consultant. So FTA hires people to come in and make sure that the funds and the project is going to be implemented on schedule and according to their to plans that are developed by the City of Waco in consultation with FTA requirements. And so we need to just make sure that we're going through the steps if we want to be able to leverage those funds, if that's the way the city chooses to go. But there are steps and requirements that FTA requires if that is the path forward for the Franklin Avenue improvements as to be counted as a portion of that local match for the BRT project. Kind of going back to, whoops, sorry about that. Kind of going back to that concept of the scalability of the project and of the nature of what we could potentially be doing. We're looking at, how much local match could we do if we had a $20 million project or a $10 million project. And one of the things that I did want to tell you is that if you go back to the map, we had a few slides back where we had the red lines looking at primarily the Franklin, or what Bill had referred to as segment B. That, if that were the BRT project, that would probably be just around 10 million, maybe a little bit more by the time we get out with a few more years of inflation on it. That would be about where we're talking about for that segment, the level of improvements you could get if you're talking about the current type of investment that we're talking about for a project, if that makes sense. So that would be about Franklin and 35th to MLK, which is really just our first stop on the north side of the river along Franklin. That helps people to kind of visualize what they could get for that smaller amount, whereas the 35 could get the whole project that we've been talking about. And that is a critical kind of decision that may need to be made at some point in the future. We're not asking for that decision today. And there's additional study that we can talk about, or Serena will touch on later regarding that. Again, I'd said that there are two primary federal funding programs that we can be looking at for this project. The Small Starts program I went through kind of at the beginning of this presentation as to what those requirements are. One of the things I want to highlight here is that that's a multi-step, multi-year process that requires us to have to be able to demonstrate that we have the funding for that long-term commitment to operate not only the BRT but the rest of the transit system, and that PMOC is going to come in and review the scope, schedule, and budget of that project and kind of make sure that we're on track. As you can imagine, additional people looking at over our shoulders, making sure that things are happening, will raise the cost of the project some. another option, which is currently in our cost estimate. I want to say that is not in addition to the 30 to 35. We're assuming that we're preparing those projects since we are currently moving forward with that small starts project. The other is the Bus and Bus Facilities Grant Program. Now, this is a program where we would submit a request to FTA. This is a discretionary grant, so it kind of everybody around the country puts their projects into the hopper, and FTA makes a decision a few months later. Typically, those applications are in the spring timeframe, January to April, and then they're announced at the end of late summer timeframe. Those projects have less oversight by FTA, primarily because the dollar amounts for them are a little bit lower. However, if we're in the $10 million range, I'd say we're definitely a good candidate for those projects. The average award in that program is about $6 million a year. So you can see that loops back quite well to that kind of sweet spot for that smaller project. The maximum award the last few years, I'm going to say 3 to 4 years, has been about $17-18 million. So that just sort of gives you that sweet spot as to where some of those projects might be on that regard. And I'm going to turn it over to Serena to kind of summarize where we're at and talk to you about next steps.
As noted during the presentation, the FTA Small Starts Program is a multi-year, multi-step process. The Waco BRT project is again 1 year and 8 months into project development, with 14 months remaining in the 3-year timeframe, which is allowed to complete the requirements for evaluation and rating for a construction grant. The work soon to be completed with the preliminary engineering and environmental clearance are required steps to continue making progress in project development. As we evaluate local funding options, FTA also requires during this phase of project development that an acceptable degree of local financial commitment, including evidence of stable and dependable financing sources, occurs. The BRT, as is currently proposed, would have an estimated capital cost increase and a lower annual operating cost from that which was communicated to the council in the feasibility study completed in 2018. Waco Transit must secure and gain commitments of all non-small starts funding before it can proceed with the small starts evaluation and rating process. While we look at options to lower capital costs, consideration will be taken into that BRT systems vary in specific characteristics, but all provide a higher level of service than traditional bus transportation. Consequently, some of these elements can add significant costs to the project design. As we move forward, identifying how to provide superior service in a cost-effective manner is our primary task. We will be looking for cost savings measures based on different funding scenarios, and these scenarios will consider geographical changes, providing fewer amenities, a combination of both, as well as a phased approach to the BRT implementation. Our recommendation for a path forward will be centered around what option is financially feasible long-term and minimally impacts the overall ridership of our system. As we continue to work to learn what manner the project budget is fiscally constrained, Waco Transit and AECOM will seek out options where cost savings can occur while keeping the integrity of a BRT. Our goal for including information from the route realignment study is that the benefits of the study will provide a full picture of the BRT system, as well as transportation scenarios that do not include the BRT corridor. The route realignment study has the potential to improve our transit system by identifying strategies for increased equity. The information gathered from the study will help Waco Transit System approach the unmet needs of our current system to best support the City of Waco's growth and development. Once each scenario's cost is identified, we can work with stakeholders to factor in that information to select the option that best fits our community needs and the budget. Our presentation today was about the transparency of the process. We have spoken of opportunities that have been identified within the project and methods we propose to address them. The MPO's route alignment study is slated to be complete within 9 months after it's awarded. And while that project is underway, Waco Transit and AECOM will continue to support the city to address securing funding for the project, as well as options to reduce the overall project cost in line with funding constraints. When the route alignment study is complete, we will use that information in combination with the Small Starts Project individual criteria ratings to make a recommendation to the city of Waco about moving forward or removing the BRT from the Small Starts program. I'd like to thank the council for their time today, as well as the consultants for the work they've done with the BRT project, and would like to ask the mayor and the council if there are any questions.
Any questions or comments?
This is Holmes. I'll jump in. Serena, thanks for the presentation, and also thanks, Gavin. When we started talking about this several years ago, I mean, I was very hopeful that we could get this thing tracked and the costs would be maintained and the operational costs wouldn't be the increment wouldn't be too much for us to tackle. But now I'm kind of revisiting these additional costs, and we've got some challenges here for sure. I was trying to going back to the slide about the cost, what City of Waco put in, and what I would say a normalized year. And to me, and maybe if we go back, maybe we can't go back to that slide anymore. But was that about 800,000, 700 or 800,000 that we normally put in a regular year? Because we saw 1.9 million, but I know we used 1.2 for BRT study. I just want to see what is a normal year that we put in, and how to, in that context, what are we talking about putting in an additional 2.5 to 3 million on top of that, or is that included in that normalized?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Am I right when normal is about 800,000 is what, when we talk about the federal grants and everything else that comes in?
Yes, sir.
City of Waco puts in about 800-ish. Yeah. Okay. Just let me collect my notes here. And I know that when we launched this, and Serena, I think you said it's a 3-year kind of, you have a 3-year hoop that you can jump through, but we're 18 months into that. Is that right? So we're kind of 18 months to kind of make our decision on the first, or the first program that we were trying to.
When we spoke with FTA, they advised that as long as we're making continual progress, that it's not like a definitive 3-year you're cut off. We just have to make sure we're making progress, we're securing funding sources, and that we communicate that to FTA throughout the process. We do have meetings with them where we update them on where we're at, what our financial assessment workshops have spoken of, and we've updated them on our public participation that we've had thus far. So FTA, we're in constant contact with them as far as this progress, as far as the progress of the project goes, Councilman Holmes.
Great, thanks, Serena. Let me see, I had one more question here, maybe a couple more. I guess what we were all hoping, and the previous council, as we started talking about this, was that the Franklin project would elegantly fit into this, and it looks like it may be a little more challenging than we had thought previously. Not that it couldn't be done, but we'd be going through quite a few more federal guidelines in that Franklin project, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes, sir, you're correct. There is a process to receive a letter of no prejudice. And so at this point, if we were going to look at the Franklin construction side of the project, that may be where we could reevaluate and see if FTA would approve that. However, it would still have to be approved, and there's no guarantee that that would happen, but there is an option there, Councilman Holmes.
Thanks, Serena. I think, and I don't know if you haven't made a recommendation here, but I like the way you're thinking about maybe we got to take another look at maybe fewer stations or phasing this thing in, or and then just intuitively, it seems like as this, because I'm a big fan of the BRT and I really would like to see this work. And intuitively, it just seems like once it's in place, I know it's a field of dreams deal, build it and they will come. It just seems like once it's in place, they'll get that use and they'll get the revenue from just boarding fees or just, everybody wanting to ride the BRT. So, I mean, as we continue to look at this, again, let's figure out a way, if it's a phase-in deal or if it's fewer stations. Again, it didn't seem like we were too overly grand in our initial look at this, but to come up with an extra $3 million a year to make it work is, it's not an easy, it's a challenge for sure. And then that money up front, and it seemed like we were originally talking in the 20 million and now it's 30, 35. But I'm willing to keep looking at this, but we're going to have to get real creative on how we make it work. That's for sure. But I appreciate y'all bringing it in and just kind of keep giving us the status update, Serena. And thanks for relaying this to us. And even good news and bad news or medium news, whatever. I just like the update and to see where it's at. But thanks a lot, Serena.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a quick question on the pie chart that's up there right now? I can't quite match the color of the City of Waco color with the pie chart. So City of Waco General Fund, what's that number on that pie chart? I'm sorry about that.
It's the 60, the green, but for that particular year.
Okay.
Because of CARES Act, it was
a lot lower than normal.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was it the prior year? Was that the 800,000?
I believe that was the one that included the million. Gavin, do you have that specific?
Yes, I do. It was about 1.9 in 2019, including, but as part of that, you did approve advancing the BRT project is included in that that 2019 year. In 2018, it was about 800,000, and the money you set aside for BRT was 1.2. So the last 2 years, it's been right in that around 800,000 a year.
Okay, thank you.
If that helps.
I guess I've got a quick question for our city attorney. Jennifer, do you know, am I allowed to participate in this discussion given that Baylor is a funder of this initiative?
Baylor is a funder of the transit agency, not the BRT project.
Okay.
I think you're fine, Councilman Porter, but I appreciate you asking and being so careful.
Okay, thank you all, appreciate it.
When the attorneys unite. So thank you, Serena, and thank you, Gavin, for this presentation. I have not been able to have as much tenure as Councilmember Holmes in this conversation, nor Mayor Meek. However, I have been very connected to BRT because it is and will make tremendous impact in District 1. I mean, it's going to impact the whole city, but specifically with jobs to people, peoples to jobs, and the need for transportation that we have within my district. I have a few questions, but I think they've been answered. So what I'll do is I just need a real answer, because I heard the statement that the letters that we'll need the letter of no prejudice in order to go with the small spaces. Scale of 1 to 10, how hard is that to get?
The problem is probably timing for no prejudice.
Okay.
Is the biggest thing. Is the current project, and I'm sure somebody from the city's engineering department could fill in more on the exact current status of the Franklin Avenue project, but it would need to go back and be reviewed through the National Environmental Policy Act process as part of the BRT project, and the BRT project is moving forward through that process currently.
Gotcha.
And then it would need to go through the FTA's risk review, which is they bring in an independent entity to do scope, schedule, and budget reviews to make sure that that third party independent source agrees that that is an appropriate cost. And then they'd go through and document everything and put it into file that paperwork. It is a bureaucratic process that does take a few months, and you need to make a case as to why is it that this portion of the project needs to advance in advance of the grant agreement. And one of the things is that would be the city or whomever fully funding that first initial part, and it would just be match if FTA does award a BRT grant in the future. But if you're already committed to moving forward with the Franklin Avenue project, it's that you would just be doing that. So that part, it would be a risk from FTA would consider that to be a risk that there might not be something that would hold up the project. But if you're committed to the Franklin Avenue project, I think that spending that money wouldn't really, in your eyes, probably be considered a risk, because you'd end up with the improved Franklin Avenue, if that makes sense.
Right. Certainly. And the route realignment is a priority regardless of the funding direction that we take, correct?
Yes, ma'am. That funding's already been secured for that project
Correct.
to move forward between Waco and the MPO. Yes, ma'am.
So with that, once that is completed, would it not then give us a clear indication of what our options are? Because now, to be truthful, I don't know. I mean, and I get the phased approach. We're over the year we've become very familiar with phasing. We're already as torn up at one time as we can be. But I don't think that decreasing our footprint is the answer, especially when one of the things that we've used as a selling point, and I know with our industry that's coming in, is we have this, wonderful bus rapid transit system that is coming to bring jobs to people and people to jobs. And if we say, yeah, but we don't mean them. I mean, what does that mean? And in that same vein, I'm looking at potential funders, and if Baylor University is a large contributor because they've got a need to move people around, right? And I know we have some relationships with other businesses and entities that assist in getting their people to work. I think that's something that we could also use as an opportunity with some of our new industries that are coming into the city as well, right?
Yes, ma'am. And that's what we would use the remainder of the time in the project development stage, is to secure those funding, sources, and then be able to communicate that for evaluation and rating. Our hope for the route realignment study is, again, to provide a scenario that's specific to the BRT corridor, one that maybe segments it or has some modified operating segments of a BRT, but we're also wanting to look at how could we reimagine Waco transit system and maybe be able to change that routing structure to meet some of the areas where we're currently having duplication, and maybe increase frequencies, so that if we can't go with a 35 million capital cost or one of those smaller scenarios that was presented, that we would have the information available to us to see how could the current route system be enhanced. So we're looking at different scenarios so that we can have that to make a proper decision with.
Awesome. My last question, and I will allow my other council to move on. The state funding portion. What exactly, I mean, maybe it's not important about what they pay for, but do we anticipate any other any potential growth in that? I mean, I know that we are all waiting with bated breath to see what the infrastructure bill looks like, so that that's a potential option as far as revenue streams. I mean, I know that the CARES Act was, no one was expecting to have to deal with that, but with the other possibility of that the fact that I know transit is in the infrastructure bill, and you know that could be a potential option for us as well.
Yes, we are continuing to look at the changing scape of federal legislation in particular. I think we're all aware that, as you had mentioned, there is an emphasis on funding transit at a higher level than we've traditionally done in this country. And personally, I'm a big fan of that, as you can probably guess, as someone who utilizes transportation or transit as not only a profession, but as part of how I got around most of the time, at least until this time last year. So we are looking at that, and we will continue to be looking at federal sources and changing with that legislation.
Awesome. Thank you.
I share some of Councilman Bearfield's comments about the route length and not wanting to see that changed. I think so many of the economic development deals that we've incentivized since I've been on council have been on the outskirts of town. And so if we want to get our residents to high skilled, high paying jobs, we have to have a way to get them there. And transportation is just such an important component of the of securing a meaningful job opportunity. I wonder too, Gavin, to your point, I love that you are a public transportation user, and it feels like this is an opportunity for Waco to consider a rebranding and messaging of public transportation along being a smart city, being a green city, and just giving a refresh of what public transportation is, and in similar ways that we're doing with the airport project. Doing a little update, refresh, glow up, whatever you want to call it, to encourage folks to really take advantage of this system. And this is a heavy lift at $30 million. And I don't know what the best funding stream is to access this, but transportation is such a clearly undermet need in our community that this feels like the time for us to put a big financial investment in for the financial security and well-being of our larger community.
I just want to touch base on that. We also manage the McLennan County Rural Transit District. So where there are segments of service that we can't be met, that can't be met with our current system, we're able to augment areas where it's the general population, and they can call in. There's not an application for that service delivery, and they're able to use that in order to connect with the urbanized routes that are offered within the city limits. And so we do have that service in-house. And so I agree that maybe it's about messaging and communicating that those options are there, so people know that, you know, the service is there. I just need to figure out how to use it. And so we can meet those needs. Councilmember Palmer.
Serena, thank you so much for the presentation. Gavin, thank you as well. I think my fellow council members had the same sticker shock of pricing when I first heard about it on serving on the finance committee for this project. And so I completely agree with my council members that we realize that the busted rapid transit program is very important, but also I want to say that I appreciate staff's creativity in trying to find funding for it. I know that Serena, along with Deidre and Bradley, all have the same, you know, looking at the different options, looking at all scenarios. And so I'm encouraged by what's to come, but I also understand the challenge that's ahead. And so I look forward to hearing from staff's recommendations over the next few months to see what our options will be. But I know that the task at hand is not small. And so I just, I want my council members to know that I was making notes so we can take back to the finance committee and really talk about the things that are important to all of us and see how we can address those concerns. So thank you.
I'm going to just echo what Mayor Pro Tem Sabito said. I think that this is something that we've been working on since, I think even before I got on council. There's discussions about the bus rapid transit 6 years ago. So this has been a long going project. And I think that the public is excited to see improvements in public transportation, primarily for the reasons that have been discussed today, that it's a critical part of economic development and finding financial securities who are seeking to achieve that. And so that's kind of one of the primary reasons that this council anchored itself in the discussion of the BRT to begin with, was because we knew that it was important to both employers and employees to have access to good jobs and build financial securities to their family, to have a seamless way to get to those jobs. And so I'm eager to explore how we can ensure that that's the case. That is my primary goal, is making sure that we have a robust public transportation system where people can have access to their workplaces and build financial security for their families. And I think that we're going to find, the harder it is, the longer the routes, the more complicated the system is, the less likelihood that some people might be able to or decide to utilize public transportation than perhaps even take the jobs. So appreciate the hard work that's been done on this and look forward to forward momentum in the days ahead. And we'll look forward to continue this dialogue. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, I think that's all of our, we'll wrap that work session up, I guess, Bradley. And I think that's all of our work sessions for today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Are there any requests for future agenda items? All right, we will now recess the work session, reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:07 p.m.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, Jose Gonzalez versus Timothy Barrett and Juan Avila. Civil action number 6.20-CV-00782, pending in the United States District Court for the Western District of Texas, Waco Division. 2, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, and real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, ground lease with Waco Lions Park Complex Incorporated. 3, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 4, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. And 5, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074, City Manager Bradley Ford. We are now in executive session at 4:08 p.m.